Alright, guys, what is up? Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Tomboy Official. On this podcast, we talk about queer topics, LGBTQ plus stuff, gender, identity, expression, those types of things. I was kind of I don't even know if I'd call it reflecting. It just maybe had like a memory of a topic that I kind of wanted to dive into, kind of along the lines of authenticity, because I know when I started recording, I began recording on that topic of authenticity, but kind of more so related to, how do I word this? I don't know if there's like one umbrella term, but kind of looking at like adult entertainers, from the ranges of, I guess, models to sex workers. I was thinking about a conversation I was having with somebody a while back. And it wasn't like that personal of a conversation. Like, we have these conversations on a very regular basis in public with other people. Like, it's not like we're hiding it or anything. But yeah, like, we were kind of talking about, like, I'm trying to think of how this came up, but we were basically talking about, like, kind of like when you meet people and kind of like their authenticity, like how, it kind of fluctuates. Everyone's does. Mine does. Everybody's authenticity kind of fluctuates. But kind of also along the lines of, like, I guess I would say, like, with different dynamics of sexuality, expression, just even like what people consume, and kind of like comfort levels around those topics and things. Like, a lot of us, I'd say, in American culture, Western culture, especially if you grew up religious, even if you didn't, a lot of us were kind of taught, like, pretty much some kind of weird, it's kind of weird stuff, honestly, when you think about it. Like, the more I think about it, I'm like, this is weird. And so we're usually taught that nudity and sexuality and even differences about your own gender, particularly to the individual, like your own expression of it, and I guess like sex in general, or just anything about sexuality in general, all of those areas tend to be kind of taboos. So I don't even know where I want to start. I'm kind of freestyling this. I think what was kind of bringing this up is because I get like advertisements for like certain queer content, and a lot of it is from certain people that I guess they have like their own brand, but they're kind of like in the adult entertainment industry of some form, whether that's like writing books, modeling. Some of them might be like porn stars, strippers, that kind of stuff. But even like sexologists, like professionals, I think a lot of these people are professionals in their own way. But something I kind of notice in those fields is that a lot of times it does require like a level of authenticity, because, they're out there, they're completely out there, and in a way there is like definitely a lot of strength to that. And I think a lot of people overlook in general, like kind of putting themselves out there. I'm not saying like everybody needs to go into sex work and just be online, just like, hey, like OnlyFans, I'm not saying that necessarily. I mean, if that's what you want to do and you're of age, I mean, that's your own choice to do that. But I'm just kind of trying to say that, people, what am I trying to say? I guess, like, I'm trying to say, like, there's kind of this, I guess, I'm trying to be careful with how I word this because I don't want it to come off as, like, something that I'm not trying to say. I do believe that people can be victims. I'll put that out there. I do believe that people can be victims. I don't know what the percentages look like. I'm not very like well versed in that type of research, but I know that people can be victims. People do experience abuse, and some people are put in a position where they need to make money, and so they make certain decisions. So I am aware of that aspect of things, and I feel for those people. And also, it's not so obvious which of those people in these types of industries are coming from that angle versus the other angle of, like, they're willingly doing this because it's something that they want to do. So I guess I want to start with talking about, I don't really want to talk about like the abusive side of things because I really don't know enough about that to really talk about it. I know that it exists. I've worked with clients that have that kind of background or current situation going on. But I honestly don't know enough to just like start talking about it in a very educated way. So I'm not even going to attempt to do so. My heart goes out to those people, and that's kind of all I can honestly say about that. That there is help for people in those situations. I want to talk more towards the people who are willingly going into those types of fields. Because to me, I think it's an important thing that, like, we don't really talk about too much. Like, we know about what types of jobs we can get, what kind of work we can get into, and then a lot of people, they know about, like, every job, every type of job is going to have some kind of risk to it, right? Like, my job has the risk of emotional drain, compassion fatigue, getting exposed, to a lot of scenarios, either in person or through hearing other people's stories, and, that secondary trauma or even primary level trauma of just working with people and their conditions and their situations. I mean, honestly, in our field, we experience abuse from other people just because, they have unmanaged emotional conditions. I mean, yeah, it might not be every single day, but it's still impacting, working in a high stress environment where you're very underpaid, that kind of thing. And then, just having to put things in your own life on hold just because, you have to do this type of job. Like, your energy has to really be in it, You can't just be like, I mean, you can, but, like, it's hard to just be like, okay, I quit this job. Like, tomorrow I'm going to quit, because you have clients depending on you. That there are people who need to be taken care of. And sometimes you can tell, maybe if you're at a company, you're like, I can't really quit yet because I'm going to screw these people over. Like, you can kind of tell. So you do kind of get a lot of pressure in this kind of work. But we choose to do it because it's what we, feel, we gravitate towards it because it's just part of our nature. So I was thinking about that, and I was like, I think a lot of sex workers kind of gravitate to what they're doing because it's part of their nature. I think for a lot of us, it's part of our nature, but not necessarily maybe to go into it as work. And then, I know that there are people who aren't really sexual people. I mean, those people do exist as well. And so it's not really to say like everybody has to be like focusing on, sexual expression and all these kinds of things. Like, I'm not really one to say everybody needs to be following one thing, but I think really kind of challenging like where our ideas come from about these different kind of topics. So I'm probably gonna do like a little series on this for a little bit. I'll need to organize my thoughts a whole lot better because I'm just like, I just hit record. I'm just like, okay, I hit record, but I don't want to leave really with nothing on here and just like a general overview. So I guess I would just say, I've noticed something that I'm excited about that is pretty cool that I've seen. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but okay, like a lot of people where you might live, if you have like a neighborhood type place nearby you, you might notice that there's certain like queer related places where you can really where you can go to, right? Like safe spaces, bars, clubs, whatever it may be. And those spaces do tend to be a lot more, in a way, they have some aspects of diversity to them that your mainstream straight culture won't really have. Like, it is just kind of a different vibe altogether. Like, there's not really I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that's not really like, I guess, taboo there that might be at like a straight environment. Like, for example, I mean, I have this memory, it happened a couple of years ago, and I kind of joke about it with friends sometimes, but I'm used to going to gay clubs, gay bars, whatever. And, I talk about this all the time, how I was going into like a straight club. They didn't want me to come in with shorts on. And I was like, okay, well, my other female friend was wearing shorts, but, they were kind of booty shorts and tight leather shorts. And I was just like rocking like some like cargo board shorts, and I was just like, I see what you're saying, but it's like they don't really know how to handle people like us. Sometimes it's like, okay, like you're a female, but you're dressed in these clothes. So it's like, what are the rules? Like, you're not going to say you can't come in because you're not wearing a dress. And so they have to pick some kind of a dress code for you. And so then they're like, well, you're in guys' clothes, so you have to have the guys' dress code kind of thing. And so luckily I had chinos, put on the chinos, was drunkenly in the parking lot, changing my pants in the middle of the parking lot. And then I went into the club, and, I'm already tipsy, and I'm at the bar, and I'm like talking to somebody. I don't, there are like these guys there, and I'm just like, I'm drinking, so I'm social, and I look over and I just start like chatting, and I'm just like, I don't remember what I said, but I could tell by the look on these guys' faces that they were like not interested, and I was like, I wasn't interested in them either, but I was just like talking, and I was just thinking, I was like, why are they looking at me so weird? And I was like, oh, that's right, because I'm a female and I'm not really supposed to be talking to guys there are males in a straight club if I'm just like chit-chatting. Like, that's not like a thing, you know? Like, I think in straight clubs people approach each other because they have an interest. I wasn't approaching them because I had an interest. I was just in a chatty mood. So I approached them and I was like, oh, like, we can't even talk because you're not interested in me. Like, it's like, what the fuck? Like, that to me is like weird, right? Because I'm used to, like, you know, at queer clubs, at queer bars, you can just talk to anybody. It doesn't mean, you know, you're not going to give somebody the cold shoulder if you don't find them attractive or if you're not interested. You're not going to try to give hints of like, all right, like, move on, you know, like, unless you just don't want to talk, you know. But usually it's like, that's not usually like a criteria for talking to someone. If you have an interest in them, it doesn't really matter. It's more so, do I want to talk to you? It's not so much like, do I want to bang you or do I want to, you know, try to get to know you or anything like that. It's kind of more like, hey, we're in this environment. It's a social environment where we just come to hang out and socialize. Straight bars, you don't come to straight bars to just hang out and socialize with strangers. Like, you're usually there with like a motive. And like at gay bars and clubs too, there might be a little bit of a motive, but I feel like it's a little bit more flexible. You know, you're talking to people, you don't know what they're interested in. If I'm talking to guys, I don't know if they like men. I don't know if they're straight. I don't know if they're gay. I don't know if they identify as male. I don't know anything about them when I first start talking to them. So I'm talking to them because I'm talking to them, you know. I don't even know all that stuff, you know. And the same as at a straight bar, you don't really know. You don't really know, right? So, that's kind of one kind of like simple example of what I'm talking about, how the rules are just kind of different all over. And so one thing that I noticed, that I don't know if maybe it was like for a reason or because I'm like in a different city right now, so I don't really know what's going on locally in San Diego, but let's see. I get texts from Riches on a regular basis, and I can't remember what day this was. I'm trying to go back through the history. Wow, it must have been a while back then. I'm going back through the history. Really? I can't find it? I don't know what night it was. I don't know what day it was. But basically, there was an event it was either August or July. I want to say it was August. I feel like it was like 2 weeks ago. And, you know, Riches is one of the larger clubs in San Diego and larger clubs and larger just general places. Okay, so I found it. It was Saturday, August 20th. So the text says truck stop tea dance. So that's the title of the event, and it says SD's new leather fetish and bear event this eve at Riches, 5 to 9 p.m. with DJ Axel Grind. And it says register for free entry, and it gives the link. So, I mean, I don't know if there are a lot of cis straight people listening on here, but, I mean, I feel like, there's just stuff that I don't know. So I have to educate myself on this too, but I don't think that in straight culture there's really like labels for a lot of stuff, at least that I've noticed. So I don't think straight people talk about bears or leather necessarily. Maybe leather. I think maybe leather, I would say for sure that comes up, because I've come across people who are like on maybe like buy apps that are into leather, like their partners might be or something, like they're kind of like familiar with that culture, that subculture. So I think it does come up, just maybe not in like the heteronormative kind of straight culture, outside of like BDSM stuff, I don't really think it comes up in a regular in like a routine or like an average kind of conversation. Like, I don't really know. I mean, when I was very in the straight world, it never came up in my world, but also it was very religious, and I don't think a lot of religious people really gravitate towards talking about like leather culture and all that. They just don't. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of it. I'm not. I'm just saying it just doesn't come up. And so it's kind of like one of those things. It's like, how do you know about stuff if it doesn't really come up? But so, I mean, I never went to the event because I wasn't in town. And so I wish I had a review to give you, like a first hand review on it. But I mean, I'll check it out if it comes up when I'm in town. But that was kind of something on my mind that I was like, okay, like there are some differences in the straight world as far as how people label things and all the levels. I don't want to say little, all the levels to sexuality related kind of topics, right? So, and I think one thing that just confuses me, I guess, in hetero cis relationships is kind of like the gender roles. I'm not saying that gender roles, that there's anything wrong with them or anything, but it's like, I feel like that to me has always been the most confusing thing that I never understood. It's like, do people just gravitate towards doing whatever their gender role is supposed to be, and then they just do it, and then it's like, you know, because I don't really see it. Like, a lot of women I know that are straight women are professional women, and so I don't really know, you know, and they make, you know, decent money. I just don't know. Like, I'm trying to think about it, and I just really don't know. But I'm kind of thinking out loud. But I guess when it comes to these types of like events and things, like, I'm excited to see that they're branching out to have like different types of events finally that aren't so like underneath the radar, and you have to really go out of your way to like search it up and find it. I mean, it's like a mainstream event in a kind of like a mainstream gay club in a large city, where they just have an event where it's like, it's a new event and they're having like a leather event. I think that's cool. I don't know what the turnout was like. I don't really know anything so about the actual environment, but like, I've only been to like a leather bar called the Eagle. Like, that was a whole different place. It was like a whole bar that's like always a leather bar. I don't think it ever changes. They've got one in LA. I want to say there's one in San Francisco. There's one in San Diego. And usually it tends to be gay males. Not always bears, but you know, it's usually like, you know, there's a lot of, it's just like a whole cultural environment that, you know, you, like, when you go to a straight club, you're not going to see people like openly doing sexual things. Like, you might see that, but usually it's not like a place people go to do that, if that makes sense. Like, you're not gonna go, you know, to, I'm trying not to get banned here, but basically you're not gonna go to a club to just go and like give somebody a blowjob by the bathroom, you know, or like, you know, doors open, like banging your boyfriend out in front with the truck doors open, you know, right in front of the club. Like, I mean, those are things that, aren't, I'm not saying that people are just like going wild and stuff, but I'm just saying like that isn't usually like a cis hetero regular club environment. Whereas, if you go to like a queer leather environment, that might be something that happens. Maybe not, but maybe so. Like it's not like outside of the culture, and like there is like a different level of like positivity about like, if people want to be like, the voyeurs or whatever people are called, like it's like more acceptable in certain environments. Like there are places people can go to be able to go do that. I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think they called this event Truck Stop because of the kind of connotation towards just kind of like, hookup environment. It's kind of like a public environment. Like it's not necessarily there for people to necessarily watch. It's not necessarily always people's goal, but it's kind of like, hey, if they're doing that there, then if somebody's there, then I mean they know that there might be someone around, kind of the same thing as like a back room, kind of the same thing as a bathhouse, or a sauna or whatever it's called where you're from. Like people go there because they're trying to like hook up with somebody in a sexual way. Usually that's the purpose. And so it's like Truck Stop is kind of like that kind of mentality of like, this is a place where people go to hook up with people. Either you're bringing somebody that you know or you're meeting somebody there, and if you like each other on the spot, then you're hooking up. I don't know if the straight world does these things. I don't know if it exists. I've never heard of it. And if it does exist, my straight friends have never said a thing about it. But, I mean, even in the gay world, it's not like the most well-known style of like meeting people, I guess you would say, or dating or hooking up or whatever you want to call it. But it exists. So I'm glad to see Rich is kind of embracing an option for people who want to do those types of things. Now, one thing that I don't really know, because Rich's is never like an exclusive place. Like any gender, any sexuality is welcome. But, just like I was saying with Black Pride, I never knew beforehand if it would be okay for people who were not black to be there, even though, they're not going to be like, oh, you're white, leave, like that isn't, it's not going to happen, right? But I kind of understood the discomfort, even though there was a little bit of disappointment on my end of like, I didn't understand that like it was such a complex thing that like people do have like a discomfort about being around different racial groups and different racial spaces, which is, I guess they're not used to that discomfort. So I get that you would want to avoid it. But for some of us who are like me, we cannot avoid it because otherwise we just have to stay inside our houses all the time. So we're forced to go out in the world and be uncomfortable on a very regular basis. And so I kind of like, I was wondering, if it's an event where it says bear. I mean, I'm not a bear, I'm a female. I'm not a gay dude and I'm not a bear. So I'm not. So is it, appropriate or okay for a person like me to go to that event? I would say yes, it's okay. But I don't really know for sure if it's okay. Like nobody has told me, I would have to just walk in and see if it's okay. But nobody has like told me if it's like appropriate. So that's the only kind of thing that I was thinking was like, okay, is it like okay? So I don't know what tea dance means, but I'd probably have to look that up. But yeah, I'm glad if Riches and San Diego is kind of like bringing up some leather events. I mean, it's a whole culture of things that people don't maybe know a lot about. I would say, I mean, I don't know. I'm very limited in my YouTuber um content consumption. I would say I kind of tend to gravitate to the ones that I already know. And so usually I think what's the safe word? Amp is the one who is in charge of that YouTube channel, and it's what's like WATTS, like Watts, like what's the safe word. They have a lot of educational content about BDSM culture. They go to lengths, and they have a lot of like reviews about different types of like products, toys, events, cultural types of just different types of groups of people, and definitely a lot about safety and that kind of thing. So that was I guess that's kind of my intro to this series. It might be a little messy, guys. I gotta apologize. Sometimes in the interest of time, I do kind of maybe hit record too soon without really organizing my thoughts, but sometimes I feel like people might gravitate more towards me just posting something just with it naturally coming out of my mouth without me kind of like thinking through what I'm really trying to say. Like, I kind of had the general points I wanted to talk on this, but it's also kind of hard to like, basically, okay, I'll say why this is hard for me to talk about, which is kind of like maybe not the most obvious thing, but I can easily just put it out there that usually when I'm having these conversations with people, it's just like you're just saying what it is that you're trying to say. Like, I'm not usually trying to filter things and thinking about like, can I say this word or not say this word, or do people know what this means, or is somebody gonna assume this? Like, I'm usually like, hey, it's me and a friend, or me and a couple friends, and we're just talking about it, and I'm just saying what I'm saying, and they're just saying what they're saying. There's not really a lot of like filtering ourselves. I've never really kind of brought up a topic like any BDSM thing where I'm not like just talking about it, just naturally talking about it. For me, podcast recording is not naturally talking about it because I'm thinking about who might be listening, and is it somebody who's coming for the educational part, for like the entertainment part, for the cultural part, or someone who's part of that culture who is just like trying to actually hear somebody saying something that they gravitate towards, or someone who's maybe confused by it or learning about it, and they want to know more about it, and so they're curious and they're kind of trying to learn that way. Or is it maybe my mother who's like stumbled across my podcast, or like a pastor that I know, or somebody who's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're talking about this on the internet. I don't know. And so I kind of think about that, and I know that if I were just to talk the way I naturally do talk, there are different areas where people might be confused or offended by it, and so it's kind of hard to just get the words out and say what I'm trying to say without like coming across as like ignorant, or coming across as like I'm not like defining anything or saying anything or giving any kind of like educational resources. and I'm just talking about it like I know what I'm saying, and like usually when I'm talking about this kind of stuff, I'm talking about it with people who know what I'm talking about, and there's not really a lot of like assumption of like where they're coming from or questioning of like what is going on, or like so it does make it harder to talk about. I'm not gonna lie, it's harder to just like mention it when there's like all the other different people from different backgrounds and viewpoints listening to something that I'm trying to say. I'm not used to just talking to like a general audience. I'm used to talking specifically with specific people. I'm not just like always talking about these types of topics all the time with everybody, because not everybody wants to talk about it, and not everybody's comfortable talking about it, and not everybody cares to talk about it. So I'm usually talking about it with people who want to talk about it, who are comfortable talking about it, and probably even doing it themselves. And so usually that's where I'm coming from with a lot of these topics. So if I sound weird, which I know I do because I feel weird, I feel like I'm just like, I don't naturally talk like this. Now I like when I'm explaining this, the explanation, this is flowing naturally. Everything else I said before is just like, okay, like how do I word this? How do I word this in a way that's kind of more, like a broader way of mentioning something that I'm not used to kind of broadening. I'm not used to broadening. I'm used to talking to specific people who do specific things, who are a part of doing specific things, who know about it and aren't really like, there's nothing really to kind of filter, I mean, yeah, there's always going to be the respect and the compassion and the care towards people, but there's not really that like, is somebody going to take this wrong? Is somebody going to find this to be like, culturally like a perverted thing, or is this gonna be like, is the podcast gonna get shut down just for like posting this topic? Like, is it too graphic? Is it too general without any explanation? Am I being like way too vague? Like, I can't talk clearly when I'm thinking about all these different things in the background. Like it kind of distracts me from just like saying what it is that I'm trying to say. So I'll try to get better with that as I'm posting the next episodes for this series, and I'm just trying to see what people want to hear, kind of testing out topics. I think it would be of more use to talk about topics that aren't usually talked about all the time. But I also, I'm not an expert on everything in life, and I don't do every single thing under the sun, and I don't, not everything's for me, and not everything is, I don't fully understand like every single aspect of everybody's lifestyle. With this type of stuff, I'm pretty confident with what I'm saying, but at the same time, it's like, like, I don't know. It's hard for me to tell how far I can really talk about something when I feel like, from my perspective, it's like I can talk about my personal experiences to an extent. Like, there's definitely stuff that I'm not going to be talking about. I'm not going to talk about like every experience I've ever had under the sun, but I can talk about my own personal experiences, and I can talk about educational aspects to things. But I am very aware that as a queer person, we cannot just talk about everything we want to talk about on the internet without getting shut down. It doesn't matter if it's educational. It doesn't matter if I'm not even saying anything that's like R-rated or X-rated or whatever people want to rate something. If somebody gets offended, that's the end of the podcast. And so I'm kind of cautious to be like, there's topics that I know that I want to talk about, that I know are interesting, that I know exist, that I know that people might know about or be doing. I mean, but I also know what the limits are, and I know that monetization does not go towards queer sex topics. And the more niche you get, and the more you get towards like the fetish land and the BDSM stuff and the actual sex education related stuff, the more you're likely to get banned off of stuff, because they do not want us being educated about things. It's very clear to me. I mean, that's why you see a lot of YouTubers who are queer YouTubers, having like however many ads that they have to put by themselves in their episodes, because they get demonetized. Almost all of the queer YouTubers I listen to get demonetized. And so they have to get monetized by creating their own brands and creating their own connections to brands, just to make sure that the money's coming in. They're kind of putting their brand on the line, by mentioning stuff. And there's a part of me that's like, yeah, it's important to mention. Yeah, it's important, but then there's another part of me that knows, I enjoy doing this, and I don't really want to take the hard route. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to take a difficult route of, talking about things that's going to get me banned, because I know what's going to get me banned. It's easy to get banned, I mean, they're actively trying to take, queer sex education out of, well, they never really had it in schools, but they're trying to make for sure it's not getting into schools actively now. And so it's coming through on the internet too, that they're just like banning people and shutting down stuff. And I mean, that to me, the silencing is the beginning of, it's not even the beginning. I mean, let's be real, it's been going on. But I mean, that's usually where you start seeing the next, not necessarily generations, but the next group of people who start learning about stuff. If the education isn't there for the information for people to learn about, for people to open discussions about, for people to even like think about, that gets that part of society into kind of this rut where there's more potential for abuse, there's more potential for non-consensual, just like crappy stuff happening to people, because people don't know how to talk about it. People don't even know like proper, protocol for like doing certain stuff, because they don't know, because there's no content available for them to kind of easily come across. They're not being recommended this kind of stuff. They have to actively seek it out. And it's buried because, algorithms, shout out to the algorithms. Like I mean, that's the reality of it. So, I don't want to go on too much longer of a rant about that, but, yeah, I hope that, my explanation made up for the, awkward introduction, but, yeah. I know the quality suffers when I'm kind of dealing with that. Like, that's literally what's going on in my head. I'm like, okay, there's all this like political related nonsense in the background of me just trying to like talk, and so, I hope you guys find this, useful, interesting. I'm going to try to make it educational. I like the line between education and entertainment, but at the same time, it's like, the more entertainment direction I go, it gets more and more risky on my end. And then if I go more education, the more in depth I go about like actual educational stuff, that actually gets a little risky too. So it right now I'm kind of struggling between, do I stay pretty vague or do I just like tell it like it is? I'll figure it out and I will get back to you, and you will notice the direction I'm going if you keep listening. So, with that, I hope that was helpful. Hopefully you guys will like this series, and thanks for listening.